Dragon Age Inquisition barely made it across the finish line. BioWare's first Frostbite engine-developed title had an extremely rough journey into existence, but somehow they managed to deliver a great game. But from that point onwards, the story of BioWare would become far more mixed. Their next title, Mass Effect Andromeda, was a critical failure that did not sell well enough to warrant DLC development. They then announced Anthem. That's a game that was met with both excitement for its fantasy, but skepticism for its non-BioWare-like loot shooter live service design. We all know how Anthem turned out, but it was Jason Schreier's recent report on its development that revealed what really happened. A story of unclear management, not fit-for-purpose development tools, and a mad dash to the finish that barely succeeded. With Anthem now handed over to BioWare's Austin studio for continued live service development, their main Edmonton studio now has moved on to Dragon Age 4. Will this project repeat the mistakes of the past? Will it be a return to form? And just what did Casey Hudson mean when he talked about it being a live game? We have a hell of a lot to get into. Hello everyone and welcome to another industry report. In light of all the recent BioWare news, today we're going to be focusing on what is next for the studio. Many questions have been raised over Dragon Age 4 and we need to discuss the recent VentureBeat article that made some very big claims before having to retract them. Of course, you might want to be caught up with all the latest BioWare news. If you want that, then check out the previous videos on this channel that cover the development of Anthem and BioWare's rather ill-worded public response. Okay, with that, let's get into it. Dragon Age 4 has already had a rocky history, as indeed the whole franchise has. Dragon Age 2 was rushed out very quickly indeed, and while Inquisition was a critical and commercial success, its development was very challenging for the studio. 2 years before Dragon Age Inquisition's launch, as the Mass Effect trilogy was wrapping up, Casey Hudson and a team of veterans began their work on Anthem. Now, fast forward 2 years to the launch of Dragon Age Inquisition, and much of the studio began to move over to Anthem development at around the same time that Casey left the company. At this point, it seems like most of the Edmonton studio was on Anthem with perhaps limited support for Mass Effect Andromeda, while of course BioWare Montreal was entirely focused on Andromeda. We do not know if Dragon Age 4 was being concepted at this time. It seems fairly likely that it may have been, but if we move forward to 2017, we do know that it was under development with the codename Joplin, with Mark Dara acting as the executive producer. This, however, would not be the case for that long. That same summer, Casey Hudson returned to the company, and seeing how Anthem was barely in production, even though they had revealed the game at E3 that year, the decision was made to move Mark Dara over to the executive producer role on Anthem. That decision, as well as the reallocation of development resources towards Anthem, led to the cancellation of Joplin, with its creative director, Mike Laidlaw, leaving the company. According to Jason Schreier's report, staff were quite excited for Laidlaw's vision of the game, so this definitely came as a disappointment. And the loss of Laidlaw from the company is a major hit, as he was the creative director for the entire Dragon Age series, having therefore been key in its creation. So this means that one of the core drivers of the IP left the company. After this, developers were shifted onto Anthem, with EA soon moving more and more of their spare development resources over to the project as the publisher scrambled to have Anthem release on time. Dragon Age 4 development was then reset, and it would then progress under the codename Morrison. We essentially know nothing about Morrison, and that is the core story of Dragon Age 4's development so far. There is, however, a lot more to talk about because more information has came to light. Jason Schreier published an article titled BioWare Doubles Down on Anthem as Pressure Mounts in January of 2018. This article would foreshadow many of the game's problems, indeed with us now knowing that at the time of that article's publication, only one mission had been implemented into Anthem. In the article, Jason mentioned that his sources said that Dragon Age 4 was a live service game, but did reiterate that it was still heavily character and story driven. Now, being January of 2018, this was not Joplin, series creative director Mike Laidlaw's project. This was the new iteration under the codename Morrison. Now, this led to rampant speculation, with many assuming that this meant that Dragon Age was being turned into some sort of live service action RPG loot game. Shortly after, though, General Manager Casey Hudson tweeted this: "Reading lots of feedback regarding Dragon Age, and I think you'll be relieved to see what the team is working on. Story and character focused. Too early to talk about details, but when we talk about live, it just means designing a game for continued storytelling after the main story. Now that statement made a fair amount of sense, especially given the post-launch DLC support that Inquisition received. But, of course, the meaning of live is something that has been called into question. Why? Well, Jason Schreier's latest report had this to say about the future of BioWare. One big change that's already been enacted at BioWare is a new technology strategy. Developers still at the studio say that under Casey Hudson, rather than start from scratch yet again, the next Dragon Age will be built off Anthem's codebase. Now, given how Anthem is a live service loot shooter, this sentence has led to a lot of worry. Some of that is warranted, however, I do think it's hard for a non-development aware audience to accurately speculate on what that means. Now, look, I don't really like it when I have to talk about my job in a way that suggests my words mean a lot or have more significance, but in this case, well, I'm a gameplay and engine programmer by, I guess, trade. I know what a codebase is. I've worked on projects that are based off the codebase of other projects, and indeed the current game that my studio is making is very much designed to have a highly reusable codebase for future projects. So I'm going to explain essentially what this means for Dragon Age 4. Now, the codebase for a game, quite literally, is all the code made for that game. This is going to include large systems like, saving and loading, or terrain generation, or player movement, and far more, literally everything. Now, there's a very important distinction here, because when I say player movement, I'm actually talking about the code that drives player movement. I'm not talking about the resultant game design of that movement. So, the movement code of Anthem in Dragon Age 4 that would not mean the Dragon Age 4 characters can fly. What it would mean is that many of the underlying systems would be reused, the underlying architecture. That's not a bad thing. You see, by removing the Anthem-specific mechanics and reusing the same codebase, the team will be more easily able to rapidly iterate on designs, leading to a more fun movement system for Dragon Age 4. And this applies to just about everything, such as, say, the graphics coding that was done, the shaders that were made. So I want to be very clear here. Using the codebase of a previous game for your next game is a good thing. It means that instead of re-engineering the basics, your engineering team are able to spend more time engineering specific code for the new project and iterating on design. One of the largest problems faced by Inquisition and Andromeda and Anthem is that they weren't working off an existing codebase. Everything had to be made from scratch. But the problem with that, and really what this meant for each one of those games, is that development time was taken away from making game-specific, design-orientated engineering stuff, because the engineers had to build the core of all of those systems from scratch. It very well could be that Anthem would have been in a better state if they used the codebase of Dragon Age Inquisition, but it is hard to know. Now, Jason talking about the Anthem codebase being reused for Dragon Age 4 has led to a lot of speculation that Dragon Age 4 would be a kind of live service game. And it absolutely is true that Anthem's codebase would better facilitate live elements. However, it is also true that a lot of Anthem's codebase is just not related to that. It's things like how player movement is handled client-side, or the code that drives the animation system, one thing that has been a large issue for Frostbite games. So for most of the core systems of Dragon Age 4, it's an extremely good thing that those things are being reused, and it's an example of BioWare getting away from their Frostbite engine-related problems that have massively damaged their previous 3 projects. Now that said, it is also true that the Anthem systems were all designed for an online game, movement that, was easy to sync between the client and the server. So yes, it would allow for them to integrate server-client related things more easily. This would help Dragon Age meet Diablo, or it would also help Dragon Age 4, but with more robust multiplayer where you could play with your friends. We just don't know what those plans are, what's going to happen. But keeping Hudson's tweet in mind, I think I know what's up. Anthem was engineered to allow for them to modify the world through events that impact free play. It seems very logical that DA4 would reuse some of that to make a non-static world, with the continuation of Anthem's codebase giving BioWare a bit of a head start in integrating elements like that. It could also very well be that Anthem is well engineered for content addition, and I mean that from a technical perspective, meaning that the engineering hurdles of adding in new DLC would be reduced as compared to Dragon Age Inquisition. And this tech reuse is almost all good news for the development process of the game. However, I still am a bit concerned about the business model. Personally, I would like this game to be a full-priced release that is supported with paid-for DLC packs over time. I'm okay with a season pass. I think that's the straight up fair thing to do, but it is also possible that they could attempt to make this a full live service game where the core Dragon Age experience is there for the bulk of it, but that you maybe have an end game that gets story additions over time, with the core of the monetization being something that's not the traditional DLC model. So I would be a bit worried about, an in-game store or things like that, just the bad parts of a live service business model. So done right, having a game that has a Dragon Age story, a great main game, and then a more robust and long-lasting DLC plan, that would be great. Imagine if Bethesda had released 4 or 5 years of Skyrim DLC. I think that would have been really cool. It would have extended the experience. I would totally be down for a Shivering Isle-sized DLC every year or two. I'd love that. So with Dragon Age 4, this could go fantastically, but it could also fall in line with the worst of modern trends. We will just need to wait and see. But I hope that I've been able to explain here that the reuse of the codebase, just what that actually means for the game. I don't blame anyone for jumping to a conclusion there, but I do feel that being somebody with development experience and a platform like this YouTube channel, it's my responsibility to share what I know from that experience. Finally, we've got the VentureBeat article. Basically, the whole thing's a big embarrassment. VentureBeat claimed that Casey Hudson went rogue in announcing Dragon Age 4 because of the rocky situation between BioWare and EA, forcing EA's hand in creating a rather sparse trailer for the Game Awards. It's a pretty darn juicy story. It makes Casey Hudson seem like a very bullish man. Very spicy indeed, but they've since retracted the story. It seems like their original sourcing was not accurate, and the entire story essentially is nothing, with the only unredacted or unretracted parts of the article being a summary of Jason Schreier's report. So, there we go. That's what's going on with Dragon Age 4, that's what we know so far, and that's an explanation of what the reuse of Anthem's codebase actually means for the game. I do think we should proceed with caution though, given their last 2 releases, but I also don't think it's time to whip up a frenzy about the game right now. Really, I think it's too early for that. And a lot of what we covered here, while it could be bad, a lot of it actually could be fantastic. Well, maybe bar the departure of Mike Laidlaw, which probably is a large-ish blow, but again, we can't really read too much into that for now. So there we go, that is what's up with Dragon Age 4. It seems like Jason Schreier might have a little bit in his back pocket to release sometime in the future though, so we could actually get an update sooner than we may otherwise think. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out the other report on the channel today, and then the next news roundup, which we'll be posting tomorrow, and that will cover a lot of the things that have happened this week that have not made it into the core reporting. Thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you as well to everyone who has joined the channel over the last 2 days. I really appreciate it. And yeah, with that, I'll see you next time.